All right, guys, so today we're going to learn a little bit about audio and how important it is. Audio is very important in your production because it's as important as video, if not a little bit more than video. So I say this because, for example, if you have like a poor visual quality of a video with good audio, you'll sit through the movie or the production and you'll be like, okay, you know, it looks cool, it sounds cool, it's fine, right? But if it's the other way around where you have like very high-end video quality, pristine quality, but your audio is like poor and it's dipping out and you're getting dropouts and stuff like that, it's going to distract the viewer and it's going to look like a very low quality production. You know, there's no music, there's no sound effects, no sound design, none of that stuff. So remember, having good audio is very important, so let's get to it. All right, guys, so signal to noise ratio, what is it? The signal to noise ratio is the ratio between your direct sound, for example, right now me talking into the microphone, and the ambient sound that's around going into the mic. So the greater that distance is, the better signal to noise ratio you have. So my audio is going to be really clean. Here's a perfect example of signal to noise ratio. All right, guys, this is a perfect example of signal to noise ratio. Now you hear my voice talking, but you have all this traffic. I'm right by the freeway. So the noise out here is so loud, just listen. And my voice is loud as well, but it's really competing against my voice, so it's going to be hard to hear all this stuff, right? So that's the signal to noise ratio. Your direct sound to the noise ambient sound coming together. So good signal to noise ratio is spacing it all out. All right, guys, having good signal to noise ratio is the start. The next thing you got to think about is the reverberation in the space you're in. So reverberation is kind of like the echoes. So it's sound reflecting off walls and coming back into the microphone. And that's what gives each room a characteristic. All right, guys, so we're inside a small restroom here. It's a very reflective type of room where you have tile, we have a mirror over here, and it's very reflective. So you understand and you can hear a little bit of what I'm talking about, the reverberation. Every room is just a little bit different. All right, guys, here's another perfect example of a reverberant room. Listen to this room, it's very reverby. Hello! So understanding the reverberation in a room is very important. So you can control that reverberation by using porous materials, much like, fabrics or sound blankets. If it's very echoey, put some blankets all the way around the room, and that's going to eliminate much of the high frequency reverberation, and you're going to have a cleaner sound. So good signal to noise ratio and controlled reverberation is the way to go. All right, guys, so sample rate and bit depth. What is it? How does this work? Pretty much what this is just a A to D conversion. So from analog to digital conversion, you have to take snapshots of the analog waveform and recreate it digitally. So when you talk about sample rate, it's just how much times the analog signal got sampled. So imagine you have this analog wave, right, in 1 second. If you have 44,100 samples of that waveform in 1 second, that means that waveform got chopped up into 44,100 samples. And when it gets into the digital, it reconnects all the little dots and it recreates that waveform, right? So if you had 48,000, that means you can have higher resolution because you can have a lot more dots recreating that waveform from analog to digital. That's sample rate. So the higher the sample rate, the more accurate that analog wave is going to be. The representation of connecting all the dots is going to be way, way tighter, right? Now bit depth is something a little bit different, and that kind of has to do with more with your amplitude and how much information can come in like audio before it clips. So pretty much what it is for every bit you get about 6 decibels of dynamic range. So if you're to be recording at 24-bit, you would have a dynamic range of 144 decibels. So you can imagine versus 16-bit, it's going to be like 96 decibels. So once you hit that peak, you can start clipping very early. So if you go up to 144, you have a bigger headroom, what they call. You can go a little higher. And if you do 32-bit float, that's like endless. So now you can really go high up and you won't clip because you can always bring down the volume because you have so much dynamic range that, like, man, you're like way up there. I would start with probably 48K, which is standard for film, and at 24-bit minimum. If you can do 32-bit float, do 32-bit float. All right, guys, so remember, audio is extremely important. It's just as important as video. And to make a great production, you got to have good audio as well. So just remember to cover all the basics, from everything from your signal to noise ratio. Having a good sample rate and a good bit depth is great too. So remember, go something at least 48K with a 24-bit or 32-bit float if possible. Understanding reverberation. Remember that if you have a lot of reverb, put up some blankets. It'll help cut all that reverberation. You'll have a cleaner dialogue and sound. And that's it, guys. So hopefully you guys learned something. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.